For Mary Chase to have written the plays she wrote, have them play on Broadway, it's a testament to the content.
She won the Pulitzer Prize in 1945 for Harvey.
Who's Harvey?
A white rabbit, 6 feet tall.
6 feet?
6 feet 3.5 inches. Now let's stick to the facts.
Mary was paid $1 million, which was the most amount of money ever offered to anybody for the rights to make a movie.
She wasn't from LA or New York or Chicago. She was from Denver.
She always said she was happiest when she was writing, and she never stopped writing.
As strong and enduring as the Rocky Mountains they stood beside, as visionary as the views of the Grand Plains they looked across, the women inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame are trailblazers whose work has improved and enriched our lives. They are teachers, scientists, ranchers, leaders in business, education, religion, and the arts. Women who have been recognized for their many contributions to our state, our country, and the world. I'm Renelda Muse, and these are the stories of great Colorado women.
My name is Mary Coyle Chase. I grew up in the early 1900s in Denver, surrounded by fairies, sprites, and pukas. Now, some people might call them imaginary creatures, but not my uncles.
Every one of her plays had an imaginary component. She wanted to get to the heart and soul of what it is to be a child, to have imagination, to have fantasy. Mary developed her love of the theater at the age of 11. Her uncle gave her $1. She decided to skip school. She walked downtown to the Curtis Theater District. She bought a ticket to see Macbeth, went to the top balcony, and she was mesmerized.
I remember the first play I attended. It was a matinee performance of Macbeth at the Denham Theater in downtown Denver. My 11-year-old self got the same exhilarating feeling watching those characters on stage as I did listening to my Irish uncle's tales.
Her Irish background comes up a lot in her writing, and I think that's from stories that her uncles told.
She, her parents, her 3 siblings, and her 4 uncles all lived in a 7-room shotgun house.
Her home was very modest in comparison to a lot of others in the Baker neighborhood.
At dinner time, all the family would gather in the dining room, and the 4 uncles all told Irish legends about changelings, about banshees, about pukas, which is an Irish legend about a large animal that gets in all kinds of trouble.
Soon, I was skipping school to attend more matinee performances, saving the money meant for my trolley fare for tickets to the theater. Spellbound by the way the dialogue evoked such strong responses from the audience, I soon realized how much I wanted to create engaging stories to be played out on the stage.
And from that point on, she skipped school frequently and went back and saw all kinds of theater. She said later that from that moment on, she wanted to be a playwright, but I think it took a while.
She said she always wanted to be a writer, ever since she was a little girl.
She had trouble learning at the rate that other people were learning because she was such a quick study.
Evidently, in the school she went to, she was kind of bullied and felt ostracized.
She went to Fairmont School, which a version of it still exists in South Baker, and she was a terror. She was always in the principal's office. She was always getting into fights on the playground. And then she went to West High School.
She had a childlike view. I think she kept that all of her life, which I find a little fascinating because really she wasn't a child for very long. She graduated from high school when she was 15.
She was very smart. She needed to go and advance her education.
She went on to the University of Denver, the University of Colorado.
And tried to get in a sorority, and every sorority turned her down.
Being rejected from the sororities became the basis for a future play that she wrote, and that was purchased by RKO to become a movie, and you can still watch it on television.
She didn't complete a degree, although she was awarded an honorary degree by the University of Denver.
After that experience at the University of Colorado, she was quite devastated and decided that it was time to move on.
She took a job with the Rocky Mountain News at just the age of 17.
At the time, it was very popular for women to become journalists. And so she just decided she was going to walk into the Rocky Mountain News. She asked the editor for a job, and she must have impressed him in some way because he hired her to be a sob sister.
At first, I was only given sentimental human interest stories, sob sister features.
Women usually were shunted to society beats or reporting what you might call soft stories.
Where they would actually write all day about people who got divorces and what was happening with the social climb and when dogs got lost and things like that.
But I proved I could deliver on grittier news stories with some of my more daring exploits.
She rose from a sob sister to investigative reporting, which was much more what she wanted to do. And most famously, she covered the coming together of the Moffat Tunnel underneath the Continental Divide. And she had to dress as a man because women were not allowed up to cover the event. While she was working for the Rocky Mountain News, Mary met her husband.
She always claimed that the first time she saw him, she thought to herself, that's the man I'm going to marry.
He was tall and handsome, but he was also taciturn, and Mary was fiery, and pretty soon they were a couple. They got married on a Friday night after work with only a handful of people. Mary worked at the Rocky Mountain News until she was fired because she pulled a prank on her editor, and then she thought, okay, I'm done. And she stayed home, and she began to have a family soon after. Mary was always ambitious, and even after she stayed home, she wanted to be noticed.
She's a role model for young women. She was one of the first working mothers when that was not even a phrase in our vernacular.
I think she chased her ability to be a good mom and to be a good wife and to be a good career person and really follow her dreams and her passions.
She was a wife and a mother and a writer.
I know that she worked very diligently. I know that she took herself off into a room.
She called it a prison, and every day she would write there for 3 to 5 hours, sometimes 8 or 10. She tried out genres like short pieces for magazines or a novel which was rejected by many people. And then finally she decided, I'm going to set up a paperbox stage, and she put spool threads on the stage for the characters, and she moved them around. That's how she started to write plays.
She spent her days mothering and writing plays.
At her time, there were almost no women in theater. It was a male-dominated industry.
So you combine her love for stories with this supernatural world that she grew up in, and I think Mary had some magic that she wanted to share with people.
The influence of the supernatural
was so much a part of who she was and what she wanted to get across.
The first play that she wrote that really got attention was Me Third. It was a comedy, but it was poking holes in the social structure.
She lobbied the director who was in charge of the Denver Federal Theater Project, which was going on during the Depression years, and it had been started by the Roosevelt administration. And he said yes. And it was a huge hit. It got all kinds of great reviews from the local people, and she decided, okay, I think I'm ready for Broadway.
Me Third was Mary's first play that was produced and directed on Broadway.
Antoinette Perry, a famous New York director and producer, was originally from Colorado, and she wrote her, sent her clippings from this fabulous production that was so well reviewed, and they said, come to New York, we're going to produce it.
I contacted Broadway director Antoinette Perry, a Denver native, and the person after whom the Tony Awards were later named. With her friend Brock Pemberton as the producer, Tony Perry directed the play.
She traveled to New York and they put it together. They did all the things that you have to do to get a Broadway production going, and it was a flop.
It was not successful. The critics did not like it.
They thought the play was hackneyed and trite.
It became a financial disaster for her and her husband Bob.
Mary was devastated at the fact that it didn't go well and came back to Denver and vowed that she would never write for Broadway again.
The qualities that she really tried to put into all of her plays were love, laughter, and beauty. She often said Me Third was a flop because it didn't contain all three of those.
It didn't have a heart line. Mary realized that afterwards, and the heart line became extremely important to Mary. That meant that she had to touch the audience with something deeper than just funny laughs and farcical moments.
She had told Bob that she didn't ever want to write another play again. He said, "You've got to start writing immediately."
Every day when she was walking her children to public school, she would see a woman who lived across the street from her, who she knew was a widow and who had just lost her only son in World War II.
And she just saw her walking, kind of numb.
And every day she would lumber more slowly. She was very sad. And Mary looked at her and she said, I want to make this woman laugh.
Her entire goal was to put a smile on her face.
I decided I needed to write a play that would cheer people up during this gloomy and trying time in our country. I wanted to make that woman across the street laugh.
She decided she was going to write a play, and she mulled it over for 2 months and couldn't come up with anything. She thought about sex, she thought about politics, she just didn't know what she was going to do.
Then one morning, I had a vision. As I lie awake in bed, I actually saw a man in a white coat, whom I somehow knew was a psychiatrist. He was being followed by an enormous white rabbit. I knew this rabbit was just a puka, and I was equally certain that he had attached himself to one of the psychiatrist's patients. Right then, I knew I had my idea, and I worked on that idea for nearly 2 years, taking it through 50 revisions. The rabbit of my vision became Harvey. Invisible to all, but the good-natured, albeit eccentric, bachelor, Elwood P. Dowd.
The combination of the humor and this underlying sensitivity, it just makes it an incredibly beautiful story that's unique, weird, cool, and has there's no judgments in it of any kind.
I'd like to introduce the rabbit who made me famous, Harvey. Harvey, now where have you gone?
It's a sort of an outrageous story. Can you imagine an invisible 6-foot-tall rabbit hanging with a middle-aged, slightly tipsy gentleman and all of the trouble that they get into? It's a good escape.
It is just a play about this man who has a friend who's a rabbit that he loves.
There's absolutely nothing about Harvey that is traditional. It's all a surprise. And every scene, by the end of the show, you really expect him to be there for the curtain call.
This play had a heart line that was missing when she did Me Third. Mary had learned her mistakes. She knew her craft.
And I think it's for that reason that it's lasted. It operates on different levels. It's not too highbrow. It's not lowbrow. It's right in the middle. The result is you get a wonderful comedy.
Tony Perry and Brock Pemberton thought it was marvelous and produced and directed it. That became a real breakthrough for her.
Harvey ran on Broadway for a record 4.5 years. 77 plus years later, it's still a very, very popular play to produce. Most recently, in 2012, Jim Parsons from The Big Bang Theory starred as Elwood P. Dowd, and the play was a hit.
Certain stories, plays, events touch something very deeply personal to the writer. And that's true of all the great playwrights, Chekhov, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller. A play is written and something about it then becomes universally connected to other humans.
I received letters from people who saw it and had lost a son or a brother or a cousin in the war. And they wrote, "This was the first time we laughed since we got the news about Charlie." Those letters were my validation. I had done what I set out to do, and more validation came my way when 6 months later, I won the Pulitzer Prize for drama for Harvey.
Mary Chase won the Pulitzer Prize in 1945 for Harvey because she really touched the heart and soul of America. As people were coming back from the war, they needed comfort, they needed hope, they needed some fantasy and some fun.
People wanted to be cheered up. I think it was also a time when everybody wanted escape. They wanted to get away from all the sadness that was going on, and the timing was perfect.
Mary Chase was only the 4th female to win the Pulitzer Prize, and she won over The Glass Menagerie by Tennessee Williams.
The audiences loved to go to the theater and watch his characters, but nobody could touch the soul like Harvey.
It was a huge controversy.
And after she won, there were some that criticized Mary, saying that, it was too light.
Those who are critics think that the reason that Mary's play should not have won the award was that the themes were more serious in The Glass Menagerie.
There was some press about her being a simple housewife, having won this award, and therefore people started disbelieving that she even wrote the play.
But those who advocate for Mary believe that she was just right for the American times right then, and that she had presented a fresh approach. She was able to present a form of comedy that was different. She had deep emotions and messages, and I think that's her greatest achievement.
Mary was paid $1 million for the rights to Harvey,
which was the most amount of money ever offered to anybody for the rights to make a movie. That was record-breaking, and of course it made the newspapers and everybody knew about it.
In those days, $1 million was a lot of money. She became one of the wealthiest women in Denver, certainly one of the wealthiest people in Denver.
There is an extraordinary power of the imagination involved with theater that we don't have in film and television. When a playwright creates a film of their own work, it isn't always so successful. This film was so successful, and it was so authentic to the play itself.
The most talked about Pulitzer Prize winning comedy of our time. And now at last, Harvey comes to the screen.
I think Mary Chase was able to take Harvey into the cinematic realm pretty easily because she was so clear on her characters. She knew exactly who those characters were.
They filmed in the early part of 1950, and Jimmy Stewart played Elwood.
And he often said that it was one of the best roles he ever had.
I think the casting of Jimmy Stewart as Elwood P. Dowd just made it perfect.
He was nominated for Best Actor for the Academy Awards and also as Best Actor for the Golden Globes. He didn't win either one of them. But Josephine Hull, who played his sister, Veda, did win. It was the category of Best Supporting Actress.
I must thank that 6'4" Harvey.
Interestingly, both in the play and for the film, Mary tried to get Harvey to be seen.
She really had a need for Harvey to be real and for the audience to know that he was real.
She tried with the play when they did previews in Boston, and then again she tried, since she was one of the screenwriters, she tried to do this for the film, and it was not agreed to. But Jimmy Stewart, he insisted that the camera not be centered on him, but that they made it as realistic as possible for Harvey to be there with him. And so he was always a little bit offset so that it was clear that he was talking to Harvey, that Harvey was there with him.
This movie did something that clicked with people. I always find it interesting, the younger generation, when I tell them that segments of Harvey were in the movie Field of Dreams.
Good evening, Mr. Dowd. Well, I turned around And here was this big 6-foot rabbit leaning up against a lamppost.
Or they were on Simpsons segments, or they were in the movie Donnie Darko, then they can relate. Then they understand who Harvey is. She presented something that was unique and different, universal and memorable. I showed it to my grandchildren the other day, and they loved it. She still maintained for her entire life her regimen of writing. Mary had 3 major plays that went to Broadway.
Mary Chase's Bernadine opened on Broadway in 1952 and ran for 157 performances.
It was about her adolescent boys at the time and a dream of a perfect woman. And Mrs. McThing was more of a children's fantasy.
Mary always said to her critics of that play that she wrote it for children and felt that she needed to help with growing the next generation of theater goers. And so Mrs. McThing and Bernadine were both her attempts to try to grow that audience, because this was important to her.
Most of the people who wrote, who became famous in Denver, did not stay. They became authors in New York or screenwriters in Hollywood. She stayed her entire life.
Choosing to stay in Denver, be with her husband, help continue raising her sons, she didn't feel that she had to follow the glamorous life or move to New York or, do a lot of things that one might expect of someone who had just received the largest amount ever given for a screenplay.
I think her message is that you can do it any place in this country. You don't need to be in New York and you don't need to be in Hollywood. You just need to be an interesting person who's curious about life and who has something to say about life.
I continued writing plays and also children's stories. Oh, none of them quite reached the height of Harvey. But in all of my writings, I encouraged my audiences and readers to embrace their imaginations, question what's normal, and to try to see the spiritual in the farcical. I guess I just did that best through Elwood and Harvey.
When she finally got there, she had something very special that we all can admire. Playwrights often resort to the whiskey and soda route after they've been touted and become famous.
Mary Chase was an alcoholic.
A lot of them don't conquer it, but Mary did. She did everything appropriate for controlling her habit.
She had quit drinking long before I met her, but if you are an alcoholic and you want to own it and use that to help other people and certainly be honest with your family, she was right there. Many of her friends were recovering alcoholics.
The House of Hope was an organization that was founded by her and her friends to help women alcoholics who needed support and treatment. In 1978, the Bonfils Theater held a benefit for the House of Hope. They did a local production of Harvey for 2 weeks. And the first night was a gala where all the movers and shakers in Denver were invited. It was star-studded. After the play was over, there was a tribute to Mary. Donald Sewell was talking about Mary when from the back of the room, a tall, lanky gentleman walked forward to the front of the room, and lo and behold, it was Jimmy Stewart. And the audience went nuts. Jimmy told the audience how much he appreciated Mary's encouragement when he was a young actor and how Harvey had always been his favorite role. And then he presented her with a Steuben-Glass bunny and a chocolate bunny. It was an event everybody still talks about.
She speaks for your heart and to your innocence. And I think that's a wonderful role model for everyone today.
Mary Chase's story is so important to us to say we can be a good wife, we can be a good mom if we want to, those things, and we can pursue a career.
And I think they should remember her for overcoming obstacles, using her capabilities to get to where she wanted to be and never giving up.
Talent is one thing, but really it's a life in the theater is just about work.
It's a matter of both inspiration and perspiration, and she had both.
If you look at anthologies that are out of comedy or of American drama, she's always listed in it.
For Mary Chase to have written the plays she wrote, have them go to New York, have them go on Broadway, to win the prizes she won, all of it, it's a testament to the content.
This play is still so popular after 77 years.
Years ago, my mother used to say to me, she'd say, in this world, Elwood, you must be, she always called me Elwood. In this world, Elwood, you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant.
I think we're born completely perfect, and then the world messes us up a bit, and then we spend a lot of time trying to get out of the mess. And I think that's part of what she's writing about, that something about Elwood, he has some kind of childlike impulse that never left him, that we all need to make our lives beautiful.
She brought a bright light to the stage, and I think we need that too. I think sometimes we just need to be able to laugh. We need to be able to see that there's possibilities that we hadn't seen before, that there really is a Pukla.